Today we're resuming our devotionals here on our Facebook channel and on our YouTube channel, and we'll see where this goes. But for now, I thought it'd be good to spend a little bit of this season, the end of the year, doing some of this and just kind of engaging you with some of the things we're thinking about at the table and some of the stuff that's going on with us there. But conversations at the table isn't just my stuff. I want this to be your stuff as well. So if you got questions, if you got comments, leave them in our spaces, and we'll get to them, and we'll answer your questions. I'd love to do that. The conversations at the table always center on Jesus and the gospel. So hopefully, again, hope you're interested in that, and we'll again, I hope this is of benefit to you. At the table over the past 12 months, we've been going through the Bible. And we've had a Bible reading plan. In fact, we got some bookmarks. If you want a bookmark, I'll send you one. Or you can just come by the house and I'll get you one. We call it the Bible Binge. And we've been making our way from Genesis. We're going to end up in Revelation. And it's been great. It's a Bible reading plan. And then we take some time on Sundays to talk a little bit about either what we read or what's coming up in what we're reading. And that's what we're doing right now. This last couple of weeks we've been in Jonah. And we're going to continue with Jonah on Sunday. But today, our Bible reading plans this week have been in Micah. And so I thought, you know what? Let's talk a little bit about Micah. Yesterday was Micah 1 through 3. Today's 4 through 6. Tomorrow we'll talk a little bit about chapters 4 through 6. But today, I want to talk about Micah in general. And I'm going to start off with this. If you had a chance to talk to the President of the United States, who, by the way, happens to be here today, or no, the next president of the United States. I'm way ahead of myself. It's not even January 20th yet. The next, the president-elect, President Trump. He's here. He's here to see the rocket go off at 4 o'clock here. So anyway, if you had a chance to talk to President Trump or President Biden, what would you say? What would be your conversation? If you had one thing, even if you had one thing that you wanted to talk to him about. And I suppose, there's 100 people are going to have 100 different things that they want to talk to the president about. You don't get that opportunity. Micah is one of those guys. Micah is a guy that he lived around the same time as Isaiah. He's a prophet in the Old Testament. And he's one of the earliest prophets in the Old Testament. And he was a contemporary of Isaiah. We don't know whether he and Isaiah knew each other. But there's common themes to both books, so we're pretty sure it's a small world. In fact, Isaiah was part of the king's court. He was a prophet to the king. Micah has access to the kings as well. So these guys, they're not your run-of-the-mill prophets. They have some pretty good access. And Micah, by the way, is connected closely to King Hezekiah. In fact, Jeremiah makes a comment about Micah and basically says Micah's influence on Hezekiah was tremendous. So Micah has access to the king. And so what we have in the book of Micah is basically a collection of his prophecies or even his sermons. This is what he's telling the king. This is what he's telling Israel. Now he's got a lot in common with Isaiah and the other prophets, because what he has to say to the kings, what he has to say to the nation isn't all that great. Israel is in unbelief, and Israel has been disobedient. Israel's been idolatrous. In fact, multiple times they're accused of being adulterous. And Micah, in a lot of ways, shares some commonalities with others, especially the biggies. Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel, they're the three biggies. But Micah's a lawsuit. In fact, the opening verse, which we'll get to here in a second, has this in it. So God is bringing a lawsuit against Israel. Look, this is what you've done. And he's about to exercise his judgment. But he's gonna render a verdict. He's going to render judgment. But first, we're going to hear the accusations. Why are we being brought up on charges? In Israel, what's funny is even Ezekiel, who's one of the later prophets, they're still scratching their heads like, why did all this happen? And both Jeremiah and Ezekiel are saying, yeah, well, you weren't listening. You haven't been listening. But Micah, again, accusations. So Micah is speaking to the idolatry. He is speaking to the unbelief. And so this is how he opens his collection of sermons in Micah chapter 1. Listen, all you peoples. And he's talking about the whole world. And he's bringing the whole world against Israel here. Listen up, everybody. Pay attention, earth and everyone in it. The Lord God will be a witness against you. There's that word witness. The Lord God is a witness against Israel. The Lord from his holy temple. Look, the Lord is leaving his place and coming down to trample the heights of the earth. And he's speaking of the whole world, but the accusations are going to be against Israel. And some of the people that are opposing Israel. They get wrapped up in all this judgment stuff. But this entire series of sermons or prophecies against Israel and Jerusalem are summarized in these two verses. Two things. First, God is witness against them. And his presence is temple. And like we've been going through in the book of Jonah, we find out that this presence of God in the temple isn't confined to the temple. For Jonah, Jonah figures out real quickly that presence has followed him to the boat. Here it says, I'm leaving the temple and I'm coming to get you, basically, is what he's saying. And there's going to be judgment. God is a witness from his temple, and that presence in the temple is mobile. He is coming and he is going to enact judgment. And what we're supposed to see from this in these words is that this is personal. You get this through the prophets. That God is not some abstract. You do get some really over-the-top language, and you get some of this transcendent language in Isaiah and even Ezekiel. But for the most part, even that stuff, again, we don't have all the time in the world, but we could go to that stuff and show how it's personal. We're supposed to see this as personal, that God is moving. In fact, anytime you see kind of this movement or God acting like he's a human, he has some of these human qualities, we're supposed to see this is the second person of the Godhead. This is the pre-incarnate Christ. He is personally coming. He is in his temple and he is coming to enact judgment. This is not an abstract distance like Bette Midler sings about. Like God's off there somewhere else and this is just kind of abstractly talking about him. No. This is personal. This is relational. This happens in real time and real space. And this judgment is going to be Assyria. Assyria is the enemy of Israel at this time. As Micah speaks, as Jonah even speaks, Assyria is the big bad. And Tiglath-Pileser is the conqueror. They've got the world empire, and he's the world emperor. And they're coming, and they are going to destroy Israel. But make no mistake, even as we see, or even as they're going to feel it's Assyria, this is God himself. God is personally involved. And that word in verse 2 is trampled. So when they're trampled, not just being trampled by Assyria, they're being trampled by a judge. They're being trampled by the one who is witness against them. But the interesting thing is, as we read this and as we read the prophets, all this judgment language, it lands on Jesus at the cross. We tend to miss that. And in fact, we take a lot of this judgment language and we start applying it to, oh, hey, this is going on in the United States. That's not the way we're supposed to be reading the prophets. It was never intended that way, and that's not the way we're supposed to be reading this. This judgment lands on Jesus. Jesus was trampled at the cross for you and me. His enemies will be trampled at the end of time. But the place where the trampling happens for you and for me is at the cross. It happens to Jesus. You see, Jesus is personal. This is Jesus being personal for you, for you. Jesus is always personal with us. You know, if there's anything, again, as we read Micah, as we read these prophets, and we've got more coming, it's very easy to just keep this in the abstract. And what we're supposed to see in the language of the prophets is especially Micah especially. This is personal. And when we think of personal, we think of the Incarnation, because that's where God gets really personal with us. And that's where all these prophecies land. Yes, these land with Assyria in real time and space for them at that time, but it's always pointing forward. It's always anticipating something else that's coming. And what it's anticipating in all that judgment language is, this is what's going to happen to Jesus for you and for me. And so that's how we read Micah. Jesus stood in God's courtroom. And when the guilty verdict was given, the guilty verdict wasn't given to us. It was given to Jesus. It was given to Jesus. Jesus was trampled at the cross for us. He took the guilty verdict. And then he was the one who was executed. That's how we read all this lawsuit stuff going on in these prophets. So that's good news for us, and that's good news for our neighbor. So that's our conversation at the table today, and I hope you have a great day. I'm looking forward to that rocket launch. I think it's supposed to be about 4 o'clock this afternoon. That should be fun. But join us here on Facebook and on YouTube. And again, if you got questions, please feel free to ask them. And stay tuned to what we're doing here on Facebook and on YouTube. Participate with us at the table. The table isn't just for us. The table's for you as well. And so, again, participate in the activities and join us if you can. We meet at 10:30s. Sundays at 10:30s. We meet at Sundays 10:30, Sunday mornings at the Los Fresnos Community Center, and we always have a great time. And like we always say, Jesus is always there because he gets personal with us, just like he's personal with you today. There's never a moment today that he is not with you. So take comfort and rest in that. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Remember,